thank you all so much for coming to our event today. You're very welcome here in the wonderful Richmond Barracks, where we actually have a surplus pop-up cafe every Friday as well. So we hope that you will make it back here on a Friday someday as well. You're sampling some of that lovely food here today as well. So a big thank you to Richmond Barracks for allowing us to use this great location today. So today's event is about surplus food redistribution. Surplus food redistribution is a circular economy solution and a climate action, and one that can lead to a more sustainable food system and support those who are vulnerable in our communities. The theme today is carrot or sticks. The reason we chose this theme is that since we started working on surplus food redistribution over 10 years ago, we have seen a huge increase in the amount of businesses that are involved in food redistribution and donating surplus food. But at the same time, last year, FoodCloud redistributed 3,500 tonnes of food, and that was just 0.5% of the total amount of food wasted in Ireland. We know that from the EU, there will be targets coming in around food waste reduction. So should there be targets for food redistribution as well? And these are some of the topics that we want to explore with you today. And you'll get to hear some great insights from our wonderful panel of speakers. This morning, you'll hear from Brian Quirke on the latest from Europe and where we are with the proposed changes on the Waste Framework Directive. You'll hear from Odile Bolloch, setting out progress on how businesses are measuring waste. This will be in conversation with FoodCloud's Head of Public Engagement, Angela Ruttledge. Our Partnerships Director, Sheena Ford, will be chatting to Jenny Mead, Head of Sustainability at Mead Farm Group, and Colm Gibson from the Clean Technology Centre. Today is also the first seminar and conversation that we're having under the Food Circle project. This project is supported by the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications and is focused on supporting food redistribution on Ireland's National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap. This project is focused on promoting policy interventions and best practices in food redistribution to reduce food loss and waste. We are doing this in partnership with the Clean Technology Centre in Cork and food loss and waste expert Kai Robertson. The most important thing in increasing the amount of surplus food redistribution across Ireland, though, is getting more businesses on board and continuing to increase the level of engagement we have with the food industry and the voluntary sector. And this is a key aim of today and of this project. A huge thank you to the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications and to the EPA and the Department of Agriculture, who have been incredibly supportive in all of the work we've been doing on food redistribution so far in Ireland. I want to acknowledge the EPA's extensive work on Ireland's National Voluntary Agreement for food waste reduction, the Food Waste Charter, and on the Stop Food Waste campaign, which educates citizens around reducing food waste in the home. I want to thank the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, particularly as well for their support of our Growers Project, which is helping us redistribute food from farms and helping us build resilience in rural communities by providing fresh surplus food. We want to thank the Food Safety Authority of Ireland as well for creating a set of guidelines for safe food donation back in 2017. We started FoodCloud in 2013, and for this to happen so early in our journey really helped us accelerate the progress that we were able to make working with the food industry in Ireland. So today, I hope you have an opportunity to engage with us around what we see as a very important discussion in helping us really move the dial on the amount of food that is being redistributed in Ireland and hopefully have a significant impact in reducing food waste and food insecurity in our communities. So thank you very much, and I will now hand to Angela Ruttledge.
Thanks very much, Iseult, and thank you for everyone who has come this morning to be with us here in Richmond Barracks. As Iseult mentioned, this is one of our many partners. Interestingly, Richmond Barracks was originally a British Army barracks. It was subsequently handed over to the Irish Army, and then it became a Christian Brothers school as well. So it's got a really interesting history, and now it's this beautiful cultural hub which is open to everyone to come and use, and it's run by Dublin City Council Culture Company. So thank you very much to them for the use of the space. As Iseult mentioned, this is the first in a series of seminars under the Food Circle heading, and we're really interested in tackling the food redistribution actions in the roadmap. We'll be working on this with our partners Clean Technology Centre and an international food loss and waste expert, Kai Robertson, who couldn't be here today because she's based in the United States, but who is really feeding in and giving us international best practice recommendations to help inform the project. So again, this is all about helping food businesses to donate surplus food and community groups to use that surplus food. So we will be looking at the policy levers that can help us do that as set out in the roadmap. So things like exploring whether it's a good idea to have a ban on the destruction of edible food, exploring whether it's possible to support a voluntary target for the donation of edible food, exploring whether it would be a good idea to have a Good Samaritan Act, so things like that. So let's get started, and I want to introduce you to our guest speakers who have very kindly agreed to be here today. We have Brian Quirke from the Department of the Environment, who has 25 years experience in environmental roles and who's leading on food waste policy and on the Green Public Procurement programme of the department. And also here with us is Odile Bolloch from the Environmental Protection Agency, who works on all things food waste and is really one of Ireland's preeminent experts in the area of food waste. And I'm sure you all know Odile from previous experience. Before I start firing questions at this pair, I want to just set the scene in terms of where we are in terms of our global, our European and our Irish regulatory framework and where we need to get to. So we look first of all at UN SDG 12.3, which I'm sure you all know backwards, which is to reduce food waste by 50% at production and consumption levels and to lower food loss all along the supply chain. So that's really the overarching framework within which we are all working. Last year, so this time last year at COP28, Ireland committed by 2025 to include food waste in its climate action plans and revisit and orientate policies and public support related to agriculture and food systems to promote activities which increase incomes, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and bolster resilience, productivity, livelihoods, nutrition, water efficiency, and human, animal, and ecosystem health, all while reducing food loss and waste and ecosystem loss and degradation. So not much of an ask there. But again, at COP29, food waste is firmly on the agenda, and the idea of reducing methane from food and other organic waste streams is a major part of the agenda at COP29, which is really exciting. At FoodCloud, we would like to see food waste included and accounted for in determining our nationally determined contributions for the purposes of the Paris Agreement as soon as possible. Just to bring you into the EU, I suppose the EU arena, the Waste Framework Directive is a chunky piece of legislation that was first enacted way back in 1975 to frame regulations and targets around waste reduction, prevention and reuse amongst member states. Back then, there wasn't really much mentioned about food waste, but it was substantially revised, essentially repealed and reintroduced in 2008. And then in 2018, it was amended to require member states to include food waste in their national waste prevention programs, with a commitment to try and lower food waste and loss all along the supply chain and monitor and report. In 2019, there was an introduction of a common food waste measurement methodology, which was to be utilised as the basis for monitoring. Then in 2023, so last year, the European Commission tabled a proposal for a further revision to the Waste Framework Directive. And the proposed directive introduces binding food waste targets for the first time. It's 10% in processing and manufacturing and 30% per capita jointly in retail and consumption levels. So that's restaurants, food service and households. And it's compared to the amounts generated in 2020. Within 2 years of the entry into force of the proposed directive, EU countries are supposed to adapt their programmes to make sure that we achieve these targets. So Brian Quirke is with us, just back from Brussels yesterday, where he attended the EU Food Loss and Waste Platform. Tell us more about the proposed amendments to the Waste Framework Directive. When will this legislation ever be introduced? And if you're a betting man, what would you say will be in the final version?
Thanks, Angela, and thanks very much for the opportunity to be here today. It's great to see a large number of people here and in this lovely venue. So I was just back last night from Brussels, and so the meeting I was at yesterday was the EU Platform on Food Loss and Food Waste, which is kind of a network of sharing information, and it has subgroups, which I'll come back to later on. But there was an update in terms of the EU Waste Framework Directive. As you pointed out, the Commission published its proposal in July last year in 2023. Since then, there has been progress in discussions in terms of discussions around the proposal in terms of the Environmental Council and the European Parliament. So the European Parliament agreed its position on the proposal in March this year, and the Environment Council agreed its general approach in June this year, so on the 17th of June. In terms of the Environment Council approach, so that basically was agreeing with the current targets that's set out in the proposal, so the 10% reduction, as you can see in the slide there, for process and manufacturing, and 30% jointly in retail and other distribution of food and restaurant food service and consumers, basically at the consumer end of the supply chain. So the member states are very much in favour of keeping the ambitions there. Now there is a proposal again that's supported that there would be a formal review by the end of 2027. That the target to be reached by 2030, if appropriate, to modify them or extend them to other parts of the supply chain. There's also, the general approach has also looked at the baseline year, because there was concerns around 2020 being obviously a COVID year. So there is a proposal in the general approach that member states could use the years 21, 22, and 23 alternately, or keeping with the original wording, an earlier year than 2020 as well as a baseline year. So for people just to be aware of, 2020 was the first year that member states reported under food waste statistics. So the Environment Protection Agency for Ireland reported on national food waste statistics back in 2022 for the year 2020. So that's the first baseline year across the EU, so hence that's why it's the proposed baseline year. But again, because of the concerns around COVID, there's flexibility in terms of what baseline year could be used. So that's the general approach that's agreed by the Environment Council. The European Parliament to have, they would like more ambitious targets in terms of the process and manufacturing, to go from 10% to actually 20%, and in the consumer end to go from 30% to actually 40%, and they would also like to review the targets in 2035 to even go further. So that's where the both positions were, and then the Hungarian presidency obviously took over the presidency in July this year, and they were progressing. They just started the trilogues discussions there. I think it was last month. So basically, in terms of where we're at now, there is optimism in terms of getting the legislation passed through. As we all know, COP29 is happening at the moment, so that's perhaps has delayed the trilogue discussion. So there is anticipation to be more technical discussions before Christmas. I'm not sure if it'll get through in the Hungarian presidency, but I'd be confident that it would definitely get through by, not definitely, but I'd be confident, optimistic that it'll be in the next presidency, which is under the Polish presidency in early 2025. So if I'm a betting person, that's your question, I'd be optimistic that it will get through in early 2025. Now, just to note that the Waste Framework Directive also has targeted amendments around textiles, and there's a lot of provisions in relation to textiles, which is, again, a significant change to the Waste Framework Directive that's anticipated as well. So both textiles and food waste are under discussion at the moment,
So Poland is the next presidency, so they're quite focused on food waste reduction as well. So fingers crossed for this amendment going through. If not during the Hungarian presidency, then in the next
just
term.
where we're at the moment, like we're early mid-November, and with the COP on, again, into the more technical discussions to go on. But I suppose the key area is the targets themselves.
Yeah.
Where they're going to land in terms of negotiations between the European Parliament and the Environment Council, and the trilogue discussions going to be a key area.
So the European Parliament was higher, but both the Commission and the Council seem to be favouring the lower targets.
Which is a stepwise approach, really, because I suppose you have to take into consideration that, this is the first time we're getting data in from European member states in 2020. We obviously, in terms of Ireland's perspective, we have our SDG commitment, 12.3, to reduce food waste for 50%, but we are in favour of this stepwise approach to see where we're at by the end of 2027 in terms of progressing with the current proposed targets as outlined in the Commission proposal.
Cool. And what does this all mean for Irish food businesses? Because this is a national target.
Yeah.
How are we looking at more carrots or more sticks?
Well, we'll have to see where we land in terms of the actual final proposal. So when the final proposal is finally adopted, like there'll be a transposition period between now. I think it's currently 24 months. They're looking at the transposition period for national legislation to come into play. The targets will apply at national level, so it's up to Ireland itself to comply with the targets. So we'll have to see where we land in terms of proposal, but it could be looking at national measures in terms of how we reach those targets. Now, we've already started the process and having a policy around food waste prevention, and we brought me nicely onto the national context in terms of the policy around national food waste prevention. So the Department of the Environment and Climate Communication, in close cooperation with the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, because the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine are the lead department in terms of the SDG 12.3. Our department, in terms of the Department of Environment, obviously have a waste function as well. So, but we were given the responsibility to develop the National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap. It was already a commitment in the Waste Action Plan for Circular Economy, and it's also a commitment in the Climate Action Plans. It's also a commitment in Food Vision as well. So we set about preparing the first policy around food waste prevention in Ireland, as I said, in close cooperation with the Department of Agriculture and also the Environment Protection Agency, who have a key operational role in terms of the National Food Waste Prevention programme, Stop Food Waste, and obviously the Food Waste Charter, which we're going to hear from Odile about. So this was the first policy that was published in November 2022, with an eye to steering our efforts towards reaching our SDG goal in 12.3 by reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And it sets out 9 key areas. So there's 38 actions in the roadmap. So it covers from the regulatory, as you can see there on the slide, the food waste measurement, the food waste charter, donation, redistribution, etc. So it also is very conscious of the EU Waste Framework Directive. So at that stage, we did know that this was going to come down the track. So, and it's very clear within the roadmap that the process around the EU Waste Framework Directive is going to be very important, and particularly in the context of the next National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap. So, just further context that the Circular Economy Act came in in 2022, and that's for the first time is going to place the National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap on the statutory footing. Now, this is a non-statutory based roadmap because it's dependent on the Circular Economy Strategy, which is a separate strategy currently under development. And once that's in place, the next roadmap will be under statutory footing, but it will be very much informed now by the EU Waste Framework Directive, and that's even part of today's discussion in terms of informing national measures for the next National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap.
Cool. It sounds almost as complicated as our food system.
Yeah.
The legislation is.
That's it.
So I want you, as we go along and we go through the questions, to be thinking about questions that you might want to ask Odile and Brian at the end, because I have a lot of questions, but I could keep going all day. But what we really want to do is hear from you guys as well at the end of this panel. Odile, it's over to you. So the Food Waste Charter was launched in 2017, and it's a voluntary agreement, as we all know, for food waste reduction, aiming to achieve a 50% reduction in food waste by 2030 by providing a collective commitment for people, businesses and communities. And it was relaunched in 2023 as well. It calls on businesses to pledge, measure, act and reduce and report. So talk to us more about the Charter and where measurement fits in with it, and how we're getting on.
Yeah, I suppose, we started the Charter working with the retail sector to begin with, because they were the position in the supply chains kind of, was a nice place to start. And it was very much focused on measuring, because until we have really good quality data, we don't know where the problem areas are. And that applies within a business as much as to the national picture as well. And I suppose we decided we needed to firm up the commitment a little bit more. It was quite loose at the beginning, and that's why we made it specifically based around measurement. So businesses that sign up to the Charter agreed to measure their food waste, but we've also developed a protocol to assist that measurement, because the idea is that you need to measure it consistently and you need to look at it every year. The protocol is based on data that you already have, and if you don't have it, what we're saying is see what you do have. And the protocol is designed about looking at it every year, seeing can you supplement some of the data, can you make it a bit better. And the more you learn about your businesses and the hotspots, the more you're going to be able to target the issues as well and understand. Because what we find from a lot of businesses, just like we do with consumers as well, that everyone thinks they don't waste much food waste, and yet we know there's 750,000 tonnes in Ireland of food waste. So I think that's the key, is it needs to be measured, but it also, what we're finding is, and we're just working on a report at the moment of kind of first pass look at our Food Waste Charter members, and while there's an awful lot of motivation around food waste, and there's lofty targets, a lot of companies have like the 50% reduction, but what we see is they're not really using their data to inform the actions that they're doing to tackle that food waste. And that is really what we're trying to bring about, that you need to be, it's great to have a target, but a lot of companies have targets with no baselines. They, and like that, they're not looking at the granular data that'll inform where the issues are. Is it machines breaking down? Is it lack of training for staff? Is it in one particular plant? Is there something you can do with it? And that's the protocol is designed then to look at all these food-related flows going through your business. And if you've got product that is being wasted, whether, if it's not going as product, can you do something better with it? That's the key to it there, and move it up that food hierarchy so that you're not wasting it. And, there's potential there for innovation and valorization within a business as well.
Great, thanks, Odile. Now, will you tell me to move on your slides whenever?
Yeah.
Will I move it on now?
If you want to show just the data.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's just to emphasise, this is the national picture, and this is data for 2022, which was submitted in June this year. So as Brian mentioned, the EPA is responsible for reporting to the European Commission, and it's the first time actually that, we've a long history of reporting waste data, but it's the first time actually that data has had to be broken down by economic sector, which is, quite interesting looking at it there. And you can see, obviously, the two highest, the orange one is manufacturing and processing, and then the blue one is household. So, automatically looking at those, we can say, well, look, these are areas that we need to focus on. Not saying the others get away scot-free, because in fairness, you can see it's all along the supply chain.
Yeah.
And what you'll also find, and it was interesting, part of the discussion in Brussels yesterday was around the data coming in from all the different member states. And every year when you submit a report, you can go back and correct previous years, because the more you find out, the better your data is going to become as well. And, I suppose that's where we're coming with the Charter as well, is that the better companies get at measuring their food waste, the better the national data is going to become as well. So that's kind of why our focus is on measurement, because that'll help know where we need to be targeting our efforts as well.
Brilliant. And I think that's a point worth dwelling on. As you get better at national measurement, you can see where the problems are, and the various departments of the EPA can tackle it. So too, if businesses get better at measuring their food waste, they can see where the problems are and they can start tackling it. And Odile, now this is a stupid question, but if you're measuring your food waste and then you decide that you can reduce it by donating food, does that benefit your food waste reporting?
Yeah, if you're currently sending that to some kind of waste management option, that by donating it instead of sending it to waste management, you're preventing food waste. You're reducing it. Obviously, for us, the holy grail is preventing at source, so not producing the waste in the first place. A lot of that involves system changes in your company. It involves behaviour change. It's quite complicated, but there's some, and it probably involves talking all across your company as well. But obviously, donation is the next best thing on the food use hierarchy, and you're still feeding humans, but like I said, if that's currently going for waste management, then you're moving it up the hierarchy. So and the protocol is designed to help you identify that as well. So it's kind of you're identifying potentially preventable food waste and potentially donatable food waste as well.
And it impacts your bottom line basically when you're doing your reporting. I have a tricky question. So I looked at the membership list of the Food Waste Charter, and there are some businesses on there that we don't think are currently donating food. And then we know that we have some food businesses that are donating food that aren't on the list. How can we get businesses to do both? Isn't it so much easier, for example, to do the reporting under the Food Waste Charter than it would be, for example, if companies are experiencing downward pressure to report on CSRD? Isn't what's in the Food Waste Charter so much more straightforward?
Yeah, I suppose what we're trying to do with the Food Waste Charter, it's based on international methodologies, so it is compatible with international methodologies. We're trying to bring about that consistency of reporting. We're doing our best not to make it too onerous in terms of reporting. So, we're looking at, for example, trying to integrate it into Origin Green if you're already an Origin Green membership. And I do understand that, there are food waste targets coming in as part of Origin Green membership as well. This is actually how you measure your food waste. And a lot of, like the CSRD and even in Origin Green, it doesn't tell you how to measure it. And this gives you that accountability. If, you're going around telling people we're reducing our food waste, we've got this target, we're not sending food waste to landfill, this will help you actually account for that. And the process of looking at all your process flows and seeing can you do something better, that's actually due diligence, which will kind of tick a box there as well. I think there's a due diligence directive coming down the line as well. So it just gives you that systematic look at your business that you can stand over what you're doing, and you've got the numbers to back it up as well. So I think in terms of more businesses, that's definitely something like this is a voluntary agreement. We've got maybe another year to make this work before we've got really binding targets. And if we don't get a critical mass, it's not going to work. And I think maybe if you just put up the next slide there, it makes sense for businesses as well. It's not only, as I said, that kind of that due diligence, that accountability, but what you're actually doing. You're reducing your costs. A lot of businesses just see waste as a cost, but if you're doing something better with it, you might even make money out of it. Opportunities for innovation. We've seen companies, we've members in the charter at the moment who found, they had offcuts at the end of their process. First of all, they went back and looked at how they could improve that there weren't as many offcuts at the end through machine, refining, but also going back up the line, improving the texture of the product so that it didn't waste as much when it was being cut. But then they also found a market for the offcuts, so, and that kind of thing is a perfect example of innovation where you're building your business and, adding value to stuff. So I think, from a basic business level, you need to be asking yourself if there's stuff coming out the other end that you're not, realising its full potential. And that's the point of having the data that can help you do that.
Amazing. Thanks, Odile. And God bless the EU for driving the environmental agenda. There is, as part of the EU Green Deal, there is a due diligence reporting directive coming down the line as well. So just back to you, Brian, briefly. There was a full day of sessions, seminars and updates yesterday at the Food Loss and Waste platform. Anything else that really struck you as interesting or new and exciting for the audience here?
That's why I brought my notes, so it's fresh in my brain. So just basically, there's a few it was very interesting days. It's a great opportunity for networking and just understanding, I suppose, the wider EU context, but also the wider international context, and I encourage everybody to go on the platform webpage. There's a lot of good information there. in terms of resources and also finding out what's going on in other countries. But basically, a few highlights that struck me yesterday was the World Resources Institute. They presented on progress internationally in terms of region SDG. The picture isn't looking that good unless there's a stepwise change worldwide. There are signs of progress. There are some companies making very good progress in terms of reducing food waste. But they would like to see a growing number of countries or companies engaging in this whole area of committing to food waste reduction as well. They did highlight some good examples of countries that are making good progress, and EU was highlighted as well, which follows on from your comment there, Angela, in terms of the initiatives that are being taken out. There was a presentation from the OECD, and I suppose from a policy point of view, it did strike a chord in terms of, that there's no silver bullet in terms of policies across the board. Like, it does tend, depending on national conditions, like, national circumstances in terms of what works for different countries. There was a presentation from Japan and Australia, and they gave an overview of the actions that they've taken, and there's some very interesting initiatives as well. I suppose Australia, they have seeing a growing interest from companies engaging in the whole area of food waste reduction, evidenced by increasing attendance at their food waste summits in Australia as well. There's a presentation from Eurostat as well, and Odile mentioned the figures there. So in terms of the picture, from the trend since 2020, it's not looking great either. There's no big decreases now. Having said that, it is relatively new data for the last few years. They are seeing an increase in the quality of data that's being supplied as well, which is very good. There's updates as well on there's a number of subgroups parted from the platform, including, for example, food donation, food loss monitoring, action implementation, consumer food waste prevention. But I suppose just on the food donation subgroup, and again, you can go on the webpage to see further information in relation to these particular subgroups. They had a meeting on September where they discussed barriers around food donation, including around traceability and liability. There is a meeting coming up in December as well, where they're going to be looking at labelling, the freezing of meat and donations of animal products from retail to retail as well. So again, keep an eye on the webpage when there's information available in relation to after those meetings that they may make available as well. And then just finally, just in terms of the European Waste Week for Waste Reduction Week, which is starting new. I think it's on the 16th to 24th of November, which again, this is it involves ACR Plus, which is the network of cities and regions working on the circular economy, which includes the Eastern Midlands Regional Waste Management Planning Office as well. They're part of this cohort that promote events around waste reduction, and they do have a theme around food waste. Food waste is out of taste as well. So they're going to have a number of events as well. So keep an eye on those events over the next couple of weeks.
Brilliant. And I see Joanne is here. Maybe she'll have some more information on that. So the standout from all of those things that you listed there that went on yesterday at the platform is, in particular, really interesting in Australia. They've just passed amendments to their tax law to introduce fiscal incentives for donation. So I think, that is something that could emerge as a major lever for donation in Ireland. The other thing that's really worth keeping an eye on is that WRI Champions 12.3 10 by 20 by 30 initiative, where you get 10 of the biggest food companies trying to engage with 20 of their suppliers to reduce food waste by 2030. And then as a follow-on from that, they have a 10 by 20,000 food smallholders by 30 initiative, where they're trying to get 10 of the world's biggest food companies to engage with 20,000 smallholder farmers around the world to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. So really interesting stuff there on the EU Food Loss and Waste platform, and they upload all of their presentations afterwards.
And just to mentioned that was a key takeaway as well around I suppose, the multiplier effect. So if everybody in the room engages with at least 10 people and get the message out around food waste reduction, that can then have the multiplier effect of those people pass on the message to another 10 people. So it's a very good message to take away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if with my FoodCloud hat on, if I think about if everybody in this room knows a food business, maybe they could pass on the message about the Food Circle project, what we're trying to do and how we're trying to increase capacity for donation. My call to action is, if you haven't already done so, please consider signing up to the Food Waste Charter. Odile is here to support. She's always available at the end of the line if you need her. And I just also want to call out finally, before I say thank you, the idea of collaboration and the importance of the fact that we're all in this together, which is kind of a FoodCloud value. But we are all in this together. We're working very closely with government departments and the EPA. We're also working with researchers. So I just want to call out 2 projects that we're working quite closely on at the moment. One is led by Trinity, which is Cultivate, which is around creating a toolkit for food sharing, essentially, and highlighting where food sharing is happening in Ireland and how you could do likewise. And also the project that's called FRED, being done by Munster Technological University and also by UCD. And I see people from both of those projects in the room, but the FRED one is really interesting because it's another platform where all sorts of food system stakeholders can go and look at what they can do to increase capacity for food redistribution and food waste reduction, and in fact, as regards FRED, sustainable food systems more generally. So please do try and engage with those projects, either look them up online or find the person here in the room. I'm happy to introduce you. I want to say thank you very much to our panellists today, Brian Quirke and Odile Bolloch, and do please follow Food Circle on the FoodCloud website and on LinkedIn, and you'll find out more about these seminars in the future. Thank you.